All right, so yeah, we're here with Mike Woodhouse. Mike, thanks a lot for coming. We know you're busy at the moment.
It's a pleasure. Always good to chat.
And now, so obviously with the election coming up, property is a big topic coming up, and most of our audience is property investors, so we thought it'd be a good idea to obviously get you in for a chat and figure out what the National Party's proposing. So yeah, just to kick us off, right now we've got sale prices have dropped, but due to lack of supply, we've still got rents increasing and a whole lot of people in emergency housing.
Yep.
So how will the national government look to tackle the housing crisis? I mean, can government actually deliver on housing projects, or is it better to incentivise the private sector?
Well, obviously the overwhelming majority of houses in New Zealand are owned by the private sector, although Kaingaora are the biggest landlord in the country. This is really a private sector initiative. So the best thing government can do is create the framework for people to feel confident about being a first-time buyer or investing in a rental property, and then get out of their way.
Yeah, right.
And it seems that over the last 6 years or so, this government has made things just so much harder for landlords who are overwhelmingly, mum and dad investors basically. 1 or 2 rental properties, I think, makes up over 3/4 of the total rental market.
Yeah, right.
And it's really hard for them if they're having the rules constantly changed, and many of them have just said, look, we're just not interested in this. And we have to return that confidence back into the market to make sure people do feel as though that's a really good investment they can make.
Yeah, sure. I mean, because obviously vilifying landlords for such a long period of time, well, we have now, I mean, it was overseas investors prior to that.
Yeah.
Do you feel like we do need to have more landlords out there, obviously, to be able to provide more housing? I never really understood the argument that landlords are taking away housing from people, considering they're actually providing accommodation.
That's right. And the irony of where we're at the moment is that the vilification of landlords by calling them property speculators and making things harder against the backdrop of reduced supply and increasing demand has actually created the conditions for the capital gain that the government so heavily criticises.
Yeah, right.
So the solution really is to build supply.
Yeah.
It seems simple, but that's really all we can do, is to make sure that supply meets demand. And we have a great example of that following the Canterbury earthquakes, where we just got rid of the rules, the red lines, the Preston's Road development, all of that. Jerry Brownlee and the Cabinet just went in and said, we need houses, and there was a blanket consenting in short order that got a few people a bit riled up. But over a long period of time after that, house price inflation in Christchurch was at around the rate of CPI, whereas the rest of the country, it is, that's right. And the rest of the country that didn't have those benefits had much, much higher house price inflation. So I think what we've seen is a working example of where reducing the regulations to increase supply has the positive benefit of reducing house price inflation and getting people back into the market.
You mentioned the rules change and what we had in 2021 with the no clause termination, the removal of that. So the automatic rollover of periodic tenancy from the end of a fixed term tenancy. Nationals come out and said that they will reverse that. Do you think?
No, look, so firstly, we've rolled out over 30 major policies. Housing's still to come, but we have made some public statements, including about fixed term to periodic tenancies. They will go. It's as simple as that. And one of the areas in the country where we have been most affected by that policy change is here in Dunedin, with a very high student tenancy market. It's not been good for the students, and it's not been good for landlords. No. The typical renewal process would start as early as May or June.
Correct.
And then people make a commitment or otherwise to stay or go, and the landlord has certainty about what they need to do. Now, we don't get those conversations starting until as late as November or early December. And I mean, that's bad for prospective tenants coming in the following year, and it's certainly bad for landlords who are just being held at arm's length, not knowing whether or not they're going to have their tenants stay or go. Now, there is a high churn. I've had a daughter who's gone through the student flatting situation and another one in Christchurch while she was studying. Generally, they do move. And it's mostly to do with the relationships within the flat. Not so much whether or not the flat was good or not good, but they form and reform relationships that often lead them to wanting to go to another place.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And
So these policies have been bad and has disrupted that, and it has to be changed back. It's common sense. But I trust people to make the right arrangements. No landlord I know actually wants to get rid of good tenants. They're quite the opposite. They want to keep them for as long as possible and work with them, that's right. So these policy changes have had a really negative effect, particularly on the Dunedin housing market, and that one will be changed.
And you probably noticed it with your daughters going through university and that natural journey of their flatting. Castle, Leith Street, very close to the university itself, moving away to your Queen Streets and then closer into town. And with Castle and Leith Street, we're getting calls in a week.
Yeah.
You know, the demand there it's huge for those flats. You know, if it was to be the 28-day notice, that's, you know, we're talking early December there for tenants to give that.
You're quite right.
And what students are still in Dunedin around that time. You know, and many have moved on after their exams to their summer jobs and back home.
And I think this really was a solution looking for a problem, particularly in the Dunedin rental market. For my daughter's situation, it was I think 4th Street first and then Clyde Street, so right in ground zero of Studentville. What I will say though is that while they were older properties, actually they were pretty well insulated. That's the key for me when I said to my daughter, check out who the property manager is, who the landlord is, and also how well insulated it is. There was a broken window sash in her bedroom that, you know, by May, June, it was getting a little bit cold. She wasn't getting much joy out of the landlord. The property manager stepped in. That was done finally, which was good. So those healthy homes type rules, I think they were slightly overcooked by the government, but I think they were the right thing to do. So, yeah, look, we've always had greater demand than supply in the city. And so, you know, that leads to two things. Good tenants will get a reputation as such because property managers and landlords talk. They want references. They want to make sure that they're making a safe investment in those people. But yeah, we need more supply. We've got a growing university and that's great. Yes, it's going through a few tribulations, but it's very much the cornerstone of Dunedin's economy. And it can only be that when we've got good, reliable rental accommodation for students to come and study here.
So then on that, any idea of a rental warrant of fitness? Is that anything the National Party would look at? We
looked at warrants of fitness and the Green Party were very strident about that. But when you look at the templates, this is some years ago now we had a look at it, I think the warrant of fitness model went into areas that weren't about safety or warmth and healthy homes. So we decided against it. I don't think we've made any public comments.
So just creating too much bureaucracy basically?
Yeah, look, get the minimum standard for a good warm home and then leave the rest to the market. I think is the best way that I would see it. You know, we were seeing things like how many 3-point plugs would be in the lounge and a few other weird things like that would be nice to have, but retrofitting all of that into older properties and basically not really being needed by the tenants you're serving made us think the warrant of fitness wasn't necessary.
It is surprising how many people think that double glazing is a part of the home standard as well.
Yeah, well, don't get me wrong, having owned a 70-year-old house in the city and then changed metal windows to double glazing, if you can do it, that's great. But there's other ways to warm homes, and you know, I think ceiling and floor insulation, if you can get it, even wall insulation now is actually not too bad from a cost efficiency perspective, but it does make a big difference to the way we live. Now, we've got to remember our history in the city as well. We didn't build houses that well, but we had a plentiful supply of cheap wood and coal. So, you know, I grew up in South Dunedin, running along the rugby grounds at Kettle Park, seeing just this layer of coke smoke, you know, settling over South Dunedin. We don't want to go back to that. So we do need to insulate our homes better. But yeah, sort of actions have consequences in that regard.
Now, in terms of the residential property, the investment side of things, interest deductibility. that coming in has really killed the market.
Yeah. Look, I'm a lapsed chartered accountant. Yeah. Well, I'm still registered actually as a chartered accountant. I think it's an anathema to good business to just simply arbitrarily remove interest deductibility on what's a legitimate business expense. We have committed to its restoration. There are questions about the phasing that we're still working through, and that's purely a situational question, where we're at economically. But I think the important thing to say is Labor removed interest deductibility, National will bring it back. And that's the most important take-home message I could give you.
Might be a tough question to answer, but is there a time frame? Could it possibly be done before the end of the next financial year?
What we will do is give the certainty in that time. Right? And what property investors are saying to me is, I get phasing, but I just want to know so that I can plan accordingly how it's being phased in. It may be being phased out, although those decisions haven't yet been announced and are still being worked through. But the important thing that investors are saying to me is, just give us certainty about the time frame.
Does that mean it will be repealed, it's just not a matter of...
It's a question of timing, phasing rather. I think we're going from, I'm not sure if it's 50 to 25 or 25 to 0.
Yeah, it will be to 50% for the next for this financial year.
So it's still in a phasing stage. I think you'll see it coming out, starting pretty quickly. But as I say, those decisions are, I'm not in the conversations that are being had about that, so I don't want to give too much more detail that I just don't have. But that's the takeaway, is Labor removed the interest deductibility, National will bring it back.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, because we're currently at 50% for this financial year.
And then of course that's a really big step in terms of the... I did some calculations when I was a finance spokesperson for some public meetings in Auckland. We took the average house price, average mortgage, and average rental income. The removal of the interest deductibility would have required somebody to pay an extra $7,500 to $8,000 per year in tax. So that means from other sources they'd have to earn about $19,000 or $20,000. And that was 3 or 4 years ago. So I don't know what it must be like now. It'll be considerably more.
What you have now, I mean, there were people that bought at the peak of the market at, say, a 5% gross yield. They're now paying, say, a 7% interest rate, but they're still paying tax on that loss.
That's right. That's exactly right. So that's the double whammy now with those interest rates going up. That's the other thing, obviously, that we can do for landlords is to start to control spending and inflation. Now, there's no easy fixes there, but and indeed that could take 12 to 18 months to start to filter through. But we have to control government spending. We have to get interest rates on an even keel so that their long-run rate of return is better understood, and we're not seeing people staring down the barrel of 7-8% interest rates when their rate reviews come due.
Well, it seems that they're talking about obviously things sort of evening out for the next 12 months before bringing it back, but obviously spending has to be brought under control. So,
and it's spending growth too. This idea that in order to be able to control government spending, you have to slash services. Well, I know how much money is sloshing around the public sector right now. We've been there before. We faced the same challenges in 2009 at the height of the GFC. And we did have a period of time when many of the departments had zero increases in even nominal terms, much less real terms. But they were able to navigate through that and focus very much on what matters. And we will keep cost increases in health and social services. But everything else, we're going to have to look very carefully at how we're spending your money.
Well, it went to, what was it, correct me if I'm wrong, but it went from 70 billion to 79 billion to 140 billion pretty
That's the
quickly.
Net debt. Gross sovereign debt is over $1 billion, right? So that's offset by things like government super and ACC and so on. But yeah, that's the net position, which, on a per household basis is an eye-watering sum of money. And, if you think about what it's been spent on, I mean, I don't mind debt as long as it is used for capital spending. And with the exception of a really important bolus of support for employees through the COVID period, I think there was a lot of wasteful spending in that, and a lot of pet projects funded under the cover of COVID that were highly unnecessary. And we're talking billions of dollars.
I mean, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of wastage, but I guess the whole world's seeing that problem, the same problem right now.
They
right?
have,
So,
but
yeah.
not to the degree of spending. So we went into debt more deeply. Our interest rates have risen more sharply, and they're taking longer to come off.
Yeah, right.
So, and I think that's a direct result of decisions that should have been more sharply done. And it's also non-financial decisions that have a financial impact. So how quickly we opened the borders, how welcoming we were to international students and tourists, for example, how confidently we market ourselves to international entrepreneurs and business investors. You know, we really haven't put the red carpet out for a lot of those important parts of our economy.
To overseas investment then, would you look at something along the lines of, say, you know, over, I don't know, just call it 5 million overseas investors to come in, because it won't necessarily affect your, you know, first home buyers market.
Yeah.
You know, so if you had say a minimum cap, saying if we're putting over this amount of money, you know, we can look at overseas investment.
Look, there's a number of ways we can cut that, and we haven't made any announcements, so I won't say any more about it. But I think we have to be more foreign direct investment friendly.
Yeah.
You know, the old mantra is we can't get rich trading with ourselves is absolutely true. We're an exporting nation. We are very keen on the free movement of goods and services. We are mostly keen on the freer movement of people, but we get very, very antsy about the movement of capital. Now, if we don't allow people to invest, we will have to borrow anyway. Where do we borrow from? Overseas.
Yeah, right.
So
yeah.
it's either, and debt has to be paid before equity does, right? So we've got this rather unusual approach to foreign direct investment that I think needs to be rethought.
And of course, you know, if they bring in more money, if they're developing, obviously there's more jobs. And
well, I was Minister of Immigration for 5 years, and we looked at this very closely with our business category visas, Investor 1, Investor 2. And the Investor 1 had to make an initial investment of, I think it was about 10 million, and then it went up to 15 or something. Those successful new residents averaged many, many times more in the investments that they actually ended up doing, sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars being brought in. So they come in, they get a bit conservative, they're quite entrepreneurial, but they want to just check out the country,
yeah.
And then they get actively investing in equities and in startups and in angel investment in a way that I don't think people understand quite how exponential that cycle is. And we're seeing a lot of it down here, particularly in the Queenstown Lakes and Central Otago area.
And then, of course, they became a convenient scapegoat for the time.
They did,
yeah.
And that's unfortunate.
Yeah,
shall we say.
Yeah.
The Queenstown market, rental market's pretty individual, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you've got another phenomenon going on there with a lot of, relatively speaking, empty properties. You've got a transition from fixed-term tenancies to Airbnbs and so on, and I know that that's a really complex policy issue, because you can't Canute-like change the behaviour of people who see a new way of investing. But yeah, Queenstown is different.
Yeah, yeah.
A lot of ministers get people coming along and say, oh, well, we're different. And ministers will go, no, you're not really. But Queenstown is. You know, you can't look at the statistics and say, well, that's how many police you need, how many schools you need, how many, you know, what level of health service.
You need accommodation for workers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's a very good example. Yeah. And I think that's one of the necessary quid pro quos to more liberal immigration policy, is to make sure that they're well accommodated.
Yeah.
And we do that very well, I think, in the RSE scheme. That's the horticulture and viticulture scheme for mostly Pacific workers coming in on a seasonal basis. We don't do it so well with other tourism-sensitive labour demand,
Sure, okay.
like hospitality
and
adventure tourism. And I think we'll need to look at that.
And of course, obviously, with all the new rules, many people think it's just easy to have an Airbnb rather than having anyone in a long-term tenancy.
That's right. So
you mentioned Kettle Park there. Did you strap the boots on again and do some refereeing recently, I hear?
Look, I haven't done anything this year, but up until last year I did about 8 games refereeing, and I was still playing, would you believe?
Yeah. Oh, yeah?
I captained the parliamentary rugby team to Rarotonga to play the Cook Islands Parliament.
How many games did you play over there?
Just the one, thankfully, because I got thrown around like a rag doll. I mean, I'm in my mid-50s now, and my wife was convinced that I wouldn't retire until I broke something. And the team is actually heading off to France at the end of August
wow.
to defend the Parliamentary Rugby World Cup, which is a thing. But sadly, none of the MPs are able to go because of the election campaign.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
The curtain raiser. The curtain raiser.
Well, that would be nice, wouldn't it? I don't think they get quite that. But look, you know, parliamentary sports are really, we're digressing now, but parliamentary sports are a really important part of outreach. And we have netball, cricket, rugby, futsal and football.
Yeah.
And, you know, we'll take the teams around the country and raise money for local charities. And it's actually quite good for people to see MPs in a different light. You think, oh, I thought you were all at each other's throats.
Yeah,
well,
right.
actually, Labour, National Greens, Te Pāti Māori, over the years have presented Parliament in a slightly different light.
Yeah, right.
So, and it's good fun.
Yeah.
And this is your 6th campaign?
Yeah, 6.
Still
That's
got
gone
5
really
early?
fast. Yeah. Look, I've got a strong sense of unfinished business. There's some really important policy areas in our workplace relations and safety area, of which I was the minister, and I'm currently the economic development spokesperson as well, which I sort of describe as like the conductor of the band, because it takes in so many other areas of public policy, whether it's trade and export, immigration, innovation, science, tourism. You know, it all knits together. There's no one big lever we can pull to grow our economy. What we need is 100 things done well. And in the key English government, we had what was known as the Business Growth Agenda, which was 120 separate initiatives that we were working on to make the boat go faster.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much where we're heading again, to do a lot of things well.
So
although,
similar sort of policy to get out as we got out of the GFC to look to get out of where we are.
yeah, well, the principles are the same.
Yeah.
You know, applying them are going to be slightly different for today's challenges and conditions. But that simple arithmetic of creating the climate for people to live their best lives and to innovate and grow their businesses and then get out of their way.
Yeah, sure.
You know, rather than thinking that government has to be noodling into every corner of business and personal life. The one area where I think we will see similar but different is, whereas Shane Jones would run around with a checkbook and say, how great am I, here's a $30 million for your swimming pool or your marae.
Yeah.
We've developed city and regional deals, which encourages the regions to say, here's what we need to be the best we can be, and here's how government can help us. And I've seen some really exciting stuff right around the country that needs to start in the regions and then be supported by Wellington, not the other way around.
Yeah, right.
So that's the broad idea of...
So that would include paying a bit more maybe for infrastructure to allow for more housing development?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes, and our infrastructure plan was announced at the Infrastructure New Zealand conference in Christchurch in July, late June or July, and city deals were very much part of that. Pipeline planning, the way we finance infrastructure has to change, but actually giving people certainty.
Yeah.
And so those are really important things. You know, it just breaks my heart to drive down Cumberland Street and see a pile of rubble where we should be having at least stage 1 of our new hospital nearing completion.
Yeah. Oh, that's been very frustrating.
And to see them sort of, you know, it's not even going to be, stage 2's detailed design is not even going to be complete till near the end of next year. I mean, that is criminal in my view. So we've got to do infrastructure better.
Yeah.
And there are a number of ways that we will do that. Housing is very much part of that. But I do think we overcomplicate it, right?
Yeah, right.
With our RMA and our consenting processes and all the rules that we put around it.
What you think? What was it? 14,000 bureaucrats hired since what, 2017 or whatever it is.
A lot of bureaucrats.
Yeah.
I mean, that, you know, you substitute a few of them for doctors, nurses, teachers, and planners, construction workers. Then you've got a very different sort of emphasis in your economy.
For sure.
So, whereas we'd often be accused of not being that different, the left and the right, I think of the 6 elections that I've contested, this is the one where the choices are most stark.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, you've got that command and control, Wellington knows best, track record of merging our DHBs, our polytechs, the state-sponsored theft of our 3 waters, against a centre-right ethos, which is, you guys know better how to be everything you could be. Yes, there needs to be some rules around that, but we'll set the framework and then get out of your way.
Yeah.
Well, I do know a few people that haven't voted before, but it really means something to them now. So they are this. Yeah. So they are this. Stuff. Yeah.
enjoy your vote.
And on that note, mate, thanks for coming along for our second episode of Props to You. It's been a pleasure. Good luck on the campaign trail.
Thank you so
Enjoy
much.
it, and we look forward to seeing some of these housing policy announcements.
Stand by.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, mate.
Cheers. Thank you.